So, I wish to welcome all of you again to our research methodology class online. Alhamdulillah, we have been very actively involved in this class. This is what series, Sharan?
This is the sixth.
This is a sixth series.
Six, yeah.
Expensive one. But this week, we are supposed to cover on report writing. We have a guest speaker this week, Professor Muhammad Aslam Hani from IIIT, and also he is in the Kuliah of Economics, IUM. But before he starts, he's coming, inshallah. We would like to have Father Shaaya to give the overview chart of what we have covered, and then we will start with Professor Aslam, inshallah. So, okay, pass this to Brother Shaaya.
Okay, I will back to the previous slide there. Okay, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And alhamdulillah, we'll be able to meet again to continue this course after being celebrating our Adil Adha for 2 weeks. So I wish everybody Adil Adha and wish everybody blessed to Allah bless all of us, inshallah. So just for 5 minutes, I think we like to recall or refresh our memory relating what we have covered for the last 5 sessions. I think if you look at this, the chart, discussion 1, I think we have covered problem statement, research questions and objective, and then we covered example of research proposal. We have discussed on the 3rd lectures relating to research design, sample design, and data collection design. And we have discussed on the data analysis, giving example for PhD thesis. We use qualitative and quantitative analysis. Both methods we have discussed, and we've taken one example of the method of analysis. And last lectures, we have talked about the qualitative and quantitative analysis. Okay, and today we'll talk about research reporting. We have discussed on how research thesis should be designed or structured. But today we are, alhamdulillah, we're going to have a guest speaker, our brother Professor Dato Aslam. We discuss on various research report. He's expert in various research studies relating to universities, industry. So what I have mentioned earlier discussion, the report structure, different university have different structure, different industry depend on the industry. They have different way of structure their report. So whatever we want to do, we should be based on what the universities or the industry wish the report to be structured or our thesis to be structured in such a way according to their own structure. Okay, so that is while waiting for Dr. Aslam, perhaps we could refresh our memory what we have discussed, just highlight a certain issue, perhaps discussion on problem statement. I think we touch on a problem, not on symptom. Yeah? For example, the COVID analysis, we don't look into the symptom. The symptom is temperature, the symptom is the fever. The symptom, not a problem. So in order to this problem, therefore we're able to formulate questions and objective of the research, and we're able to solve the problem. Okay, we have discussed that in earlier chapter. And again, examples of research proposal we have discussed also. Example, and also we discuss on highlight. Okay, I think I should discuss on the highlight, refresh of memory on research design. This is quite important. since we're talking about Islamic perspective, so in terms of formulating a research design on our research, we should formulate, or rather we should have an overriding strategy, as we call it here, overriding strategy.
Waalaikumsalam.
Yes, Waalaikumsalam.
Are you sharing the slide or you purposely not sharing?
I'm sharing that. Is it?
Oh,
You get it?
we didn't see it. Yeah.
You have it?
Yeah. No, we don't. We don't.
We don't. Okay, I'll go back to. I think I share it. Okay. Yes. Okay. And then we go to how do you go about it?
Share screen.
That is the share screen. I will just
The green.
go back to this. Okay. Oh, sorry. This one. This. Okay. And then share screen. Then we go into this. Okay. Yes. Okay. Share. All right.
Okay. Okay. Got it.
Okay. Is it share? You get it? Okay. Okay. Should I repeat again?
No, it's okay. Go ahead from where you
Okay. Just to just give a summary. Yeah, we have this. We have last few 5 lectures. We have covered problem statement, research question. Yeah, this is a research process here. We have covered example of research proposal. We have covered research design strategy and sample design, data collection design, and data analysis. We gave an example of PhD thesis on qualitative and quantitative analysis methodology. And we go on and discuss again in chapters 5 how the thesis should be structured according to the requirement of university. And the report writing we will discuss today by Dr. Aslam, Professor Dr. Aslam, with detail on various types of research that he is expert with, universities' work and industries' work as well. So here, for this, I just try to highlight a certain salient issue that we have discussed. This discussion 1, we discussed on problem statement. We should not involve in the symptom. Most researcher, they get into the problem, they get into symptom, not the problem. For example, COVID analysis, we don't look into the symptom, like fevers and high temperature. They are symptoms, but the real problem is different. It's the difference of how the virus has been transmitted and so on. That is a big problem. And then we're able to come out with research questions and objective. And so we have discussion 2, example, research proposal. And we have discussed on research design strategy and sample design. We have touched on analysis, example of PhD analysis, both qualitative and quantitative analysis. We also discussed on this how this qualitative and quantitative analysis is being analyzed, method being analyzed. And of course, perhaps today you thought of research report and so on. As we had mentioned earlier, that various universities, various industry, they have their own what they call own structure. For example, certain university, they would like to have their own structure in this way. Anyway, the methods is a method of different in terms of chapters. Okay, and of course, today Professor Dr. Aslam will discuss on this issue of how best research report could be structured according to his experience, both universities and industry. Okay, and just this 5 minutes, I would like to cover these 5 chapters just to highlight certain issues. For example, research design is the most important area. Since it is based on the Islamic perspective, our research strategy, we should have the overriding strategy to fulfill the maqasid al-shari'ah, that is protection of religion, protection of life, protection of intellect, and then offspring and wealth. This is a very important overriding strategy. And other strategy, we call it tactical strategies, the type of research you want to use, either qualitative or quantitative, our purpose of research, time dimension, scope, environment, and so on. And of course, data collections and sampling design. And we have discussed on the strategy, okay, design strategy. And we have discussed the qualitative and quantitative research, was a different way of design, actually. And we have identified a certain sampling design. For example, in terms of quantitative research. There are various probability sampling design. We discuss on complex, random, systematic, cluster, stratified, and double sampling. And we also discuss on the non-probability sampling, market survey research. See, these are more non-probability, convenient for perceived judgment, quota, and so on. We have discussed in detail. And we also discussed on the qualitative research. We've chosen content analysis as an example because it's very subjective, but at least we are able to understand the pattern of the subject we have studied. For our example is the perception of Maqasid al-Sharia among scholars and professional managers. From this quantitative analysis, we're able to identify the pattern of their thinking toward Maqasid al-Sharia. From there, we could proceed further research. Yes, and also we thought of data collection method, instrument of data, personal interview, phone interview, and so on and so on. Okay, and we also discussed on the characteristic of sound research, and Dr. Professor Jamil has discussed on the validity, reliability, and practicality of research. This is very important. Whatever research we do, it should be validity, have reliability, and practicality is very important. Okay, and we give an example how these thesis report writing will be in terms of you're doing a PhD or you're doing a master's. These are one of the structured recommended or required by a university. Just an example. Okay, they have in chapter 1 introduction, literature review, research methodology, data analysis and results, and then research finding and conclusion and bibliography and findings and so on. These are just an example. Okay, and today perhaps Professor Dr. Aslam will be able to proceed on the detail how various universities, various industry, how the report writing should be made or example in industry different than that university. So I think I leave it to Dr. Aslam to proceed. Is it, Dato? Give back to Dato. Dr. Jamil. Yes, Dr. Jamil.
Maybe Dato is new.
Dato, I just take
Oh
this
yeah,
one.
yeah, he's on mute. So please unmute.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Brother Shaaya. And then now, now we are inviting Professor Aslam. Is he here?
Yes.
Yes, Dato, I'm here.
Yeah, I think Brother Shaaya has given the overview of everything we have already covered. What is required in the research methodology, including the Maqasid Sharia and the ethic in the Islamic ethic in research that has been covered in every aspect of our research process. So even we are coming now to the report writing, also there are some ethic Professor Aslam can highlight on this. Now I wish to welcome Professor Aslam. He's a professor in Islamic economics at the Kuliah of Economic International Islamic University, and also he's the director for academic at the International Institute of Islamic Thought for East and South Asia. May I welcome Professor Aslam.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you. Let me immediately go to my slides. The first thing, of course, I need to apologize because my slides will not be as sophisticated as Dato and Haji Shaaya's slides. Very simple, a few slides, and I've even taken one from the slides that you were using. I didn't know that you would be giving those few introductory comments. So there is also a kind of an overlap with the slide that you are presenting. I'm asked to come to talk about research report writing. I will be focusing on thesis, although I'm sure anybody who Googles this topic, you can find so much material written on report writing. Yeah, so if we were talking about report writing, there would be incredible amounts of literature available. And even in the case of research report writing, there are so many, different write-ups and videos, and really, I think everybody today is so lucky to have all this material with you to give you guide. Yeah, but I will be focusing much more on thesis writing, because when I received the slides that were done by Haji Shaaya, I looked at this and I really feel it's a very comprehensive, comprehensive process, and the different stages which you all have gone through. So I am actually just, coming in at the end to talk about report writing. So what I would like to do, if you agree, is to actually, just talk about more academic writing actually. Although Haji Shaaya mentioned about industry research, we can discuss this if anyone has comments, and I will try to maybe make a few comments regarding industry research. But when we talk about our research reports, I think the first thing that we need to keep in mind is that there can be different ways that you present your research, and sometimes they are connected to each other. If we go with thesis, usually our audience when we write the thesis is initially for the examiners. Yeah, so immediately, if any one of you has gone through literature in the internet about report writing, you're talking about audience, in this case the examiners, who are experts in their fields. Yeah, so I think this is where all the previous weeks of lectures by both Dato Jamil and Shaaya, this will be very important. You're not talking to people who don't know about the topic. Yeah. But the interesting thing about thesis, sometimes we also tell students that you have to write a thesis in a way that even though it is being examined by professors and people who are well versed, you have to also present it in such a way as if you're talking to people who don't know. Okay? So you have to balance between the basics, introducing the topic, making a good explanation about what you're doing. At the same time, you have to remember that the examiners are the ones looking at it. Yeah? So this is one of the, maybe one challenge later when we talk about content, we will talk about this. So the thesis is later converted into, this used to be the old days where you write your thesis first, and then you convert your thesis into journal articles, or you will present conference paper, or you will write a report, or you will write a monograph. Today, I believe many universities, they are actually requiring you to write a journal article as part of your PhD requirement, or they will ask you to present conference papers, right? And of course, all of us know today, when you talk about journal articles, it's not just in any journal. You have reviewed journals, you have non-reviewed journals. You have indexed journals and those that are not indexed, and the different index that is used. You have the Scopus journals, you have the Web of Science journals, etc., etc. So it's really a very wide scope of journals, and based on your university, they have set certain standards. In IIUM, we don't require, as far as I know, journals that they must be in Scopus journal, but the journal must be a well-established journal. It must be a reviewed journal. There must be a review process that is followed, not just you send to any journal, you pay some money and they publish your article. So this is very important. Even conferences and seminars, there are different levels of conferences. There are conferences that are also organized to make money. The organizer is a professional conference organizer, right? So these are certain types of conferences, but you also have those conferences that are very much academic based, and therefore definitely uh, your university would prefer if you try to get your papers into these kind of conferences. Having said that, if your topic of research is something which is very industry related, then chances are the people who are sponsoring your thesis or who are sponsoring your research, they may actually require you to present in one of the conferences which are more related. So for example, in the area that I come, conferences that are more academic in nature, and we also have those conferences that are more geared towards industry, right? So it's possible that if you are doing a topic which is more industry related, you probably will be more encouraged. If not, you would be required to present in those industry conferences. Yeah? So the level of the report varies. Yeah, for example, academic research, they would like to see the theory, they would like to, and maybe all those points that were raised by Dato and Haji Shaaya in terms of research design and the hypothesis. You may want to do that in academic conferences, but in industry conferences, they may want you to go straight to the issue at hand. What is the issue that you are focusing on? What are the challenges faced by, let's say, the customers of the bank. So it may be a very different kind of audience that you are referring to. Yeah. So really, research reports in the form of papers or even research monographs really depends on the audience. Yeah. But let's focus on thesis for this remaining of the next few slides. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to focus on some challenges and some ethical issues in thesis writing. All right. Now, I'm sure anybody who is in a university from the audience, your university must have organized seminars, or they must have some kind of activity that talks about your research process, yeah, how you do research, etc. So in this few slides that I have, 4 to 5 slides, I just want to share with you some of the challenges that I have faced, that I come across in the few years that I have been supervising and reviewing thesis. I'm sure Dato will have even more years of experience to share. But let me just, share with you these common challenges, and then a few ethical issues maybe that you may want to also contribute to later. The first thing, which is the most basic, whichever language you are writing in, and I'm referring to in IIUM, of course, in English language, please get the thesis edited. Yeah. Now, some of you may think that this is not so important as long as it's readable, but it has a very big impact on the examiners. Yeah? In this case, you are writing for examiners. You may think to yourself, never mind, once I get my PhD, when I decide to publish the thesis or when I decide to convert it into a book, then I will think about the editing. But believe me, language in the PhD thesis is very, very, very important. There is nothing better than a perfectly flowing thesis with good English or good Malay or good Arabic, where the examiner is actually happy to read the thesis. But if every 1 or 2 lines there is a mistake in grammar, there is a sentence construction is difficult, this is actually not doing justice to yourself. So I would advise everybody, please get your thesis edited. And I have examples. Yeah, in fact, some of my own students also, if they had got their thesis edited, they would have got an A. It would have been in the Viva, it probably would have been given the category of merit, thesis, worthy of publication. But because it was not edited, they sometimes lose out. Yeah. On the other hand, theses that are not exceptionally good from a idea point of view, but once it is written in excellent English, it goes up the ranking. Yeah? So please, very important, language. Make sure if you are not yourself able to ensure that the language is good, get the thesis edited. Secondly, in terms of length, there is no guarantee the longer you write, the better your thesis is. Yeah? And that is why in most universities, they will set a limit to how many words your thesis can be. Yeah? For example, it may be between 80,000 to 90,000 words, or sometimes even less, 60,000 to 80,000. I've seen certain universities where they set these, these categories. If you do have a certain limit, then you need to stick to that limit. Yeah? This is, of course, your supervisor's duty to tell you. And sometimes trying to cut down the length is not easy. Yeah, because you have worked on something for 3-4 years, you think that you need to put everything into the thesis, but actually it's not necessary. There is a way for you to to reduce certain things and so on. Every chapter should be about equal length. You shouldn't have one chapter that is 10 pages and then another chapter which is 70 pages, right? You should try to divide your chapters in such a way that they are about equal. Now, how many chapters? Again, there is no fixed rule. I think it depends on what is it you want to do. In terms of content, I believe the previous slides by Haji Shaaya has already mentioned. Those will, in a way, decide the number of chapters that you have and the content, a table of content, the abstract. Your chapter 1, of course, is the chapter which I do not know, Dato and Haji. In my experience, chapter 1 is always written almost at the end. You write a chapter 1 in the beginning, and then you do your thesis. More often than not, at the end of the day, you will come back and have to revise chapter 1 because your thesis may have moved in a slightly different direction. So you have to come back and you have to make modifications. Yeah? But this chapter 1 is a very important chapter. It identifies the research objectives, the questions, etc. And sets the tone. Yeah? A literature review, and then the methods you use, the data collection, the findings, discussion, conclusion. This will generally be the contents that you will have. What is important in all these chapters is something which sometimes some don't give enough attention, and that's the flow. From one chapter to another chapter, the flow needs to be there, right? And I learned this from my supervisor when I was doing my PhD. They told me, why don't in every chapter you connect in the intro, you connect that chapter to the previous chapter, just in 1 line or 2 lines, and then at the end of the chapter, have a chapter conclusion in which you give a summary of what you did and then what you're going to do in the next chapter. Now, I think it's a very effective way, because when examiner is reading, or even when anybody is reading, the flow is very important. Again, I have seen many cases where it's a wonderful thesis, but the chapters don't connect and don't flow smoothly. So this is, I think, a very important point that you must keep in mind. Yeah. What's next? Headings and subheadings. Now, this again is a very, very simple thing, but can be quite a challenge to many students. Yeah? When you are writing on a certain area within a chapter, every sub area should have a heading, and in that heading it should be subheading. Again, this will improve the flow. So numbering is very important. You have to pick out a certain way of numbering your chapters and the headings and the subheadings. Usually nowadays they use numbers, right? Chapter 1 and then 1.1. 1.1.1, yeah, and so on. So this is very important for that flow to be there. Very closely related to this is the issue of paragraphs. I have so many examples. The student wants to say something very important, but the paragraph goes on for 3 pages, you know, and you wonder where is the break. So my advice, and I always advise students like this, that you should at least have 2 paragraphs per page, at least, if not even 3, depending on you know what you want to say. So paragraphs are important. Even in one subheading or in one heading, you can have 2 paragraphs per page. I think that would be much better in terms of the flow, yeah, again. And finally, footnotes and endnotes. You know, this issue, I think it depends on universities. You have to follow the instruction, of course. If your university is a university, or if your research funder wants you to do endnotes, you have to do endnotes, right? Personally, I prefer footnotes, because when the issue comes up, I am able to, you know, to see what exactly you are referring to, yeah. And therefore, I prefer footnotes. Now, what is it that you put in the footnotes? Clarification of a certain point that you made earlier, or sometimes you have a very, let's say, a certain point needs to be elaborated, and therefore you want to tell somebody, look at this text. Yeah, so see also Ahmad, yeah, 1983, chapter 2. So that is what goes into footnotes. Now, this part is something which many researchers, you know, don't think it is important, and they end up making, you know, quite a few ethical issues, yeah, which I want to go to next. So the next couple of slides is just talking about some challenges or some ethical issues when you write your thesis. Acknowledging scholars, right? Quoting sources. This is really a very important thing for thesis research reporting or writing. Sometimes, you know, in some cases, people always talk about the commercial value of why you need to acknowledge. You know, in other words, today, if I don't quote somebody, this is a copyright issue. So publishers are very careful. They want to make sure that your manuscript, you are not plagiarizing. Yeah? But this is very much seen from a commercial angle, right? Because they worry that they will be sued later. But I think as academics, as people who are involved in knowledge, we have to look at this issue of quoting sources and quoting the scholars that you are utilizing as an ethical issue, all right? Because certain ideas may not be yours. And if you don't quote the original source, then you are misleading people to think that it is your idea, right? And if you don't know about that idea, you are actually doing injustice to knowledge. So I look at it as an ethical issue, why it is very important for us, yeah, to acknowledge the scholars and to quote whoever it is that you are referring to. Now, very closely to this is something that I don't know if any of you will be able to what do you call it, appreciate this point. You are in your thesis, you refer to A, okay, this professor. That professor's work discusses B, C, and D. All right. Now, in your reference list at the back, you list down A, B, C, D, everybody, but you only refer to A. All right. Now, personally, I know many cases, I have seen it in the thesis that I have examined or even that I have supervised. I always remind my students, that's not the way you do it. If you refer only to A, then when you want to quote B, C, and D, the way to quote it is B as quoted by A. You have to mention. Yeah. In other words, you only read A. You are quoting A. but A has quoted B and C and D. You didn't read B, C, and D, right? So it's very important that the way you write this, and again, it is an ethical issue. You didn't read B, C, D, so you shouldn't be putting B, C, D in your reference list. Okay, very, very important. A third issue, and this is about, well, it's not in the thesis itself. This is after you, let's say, after you have completed your thesis, and now you are converting your thesis into journal articles, all right? Now, there is a general rule. It may differ from journal to journal, but as far as the IIUM journal is concerned in the past, we have a general rule of 30%. In other words, if you have a thesis in which you use the same method, a certain method you used, but for different data set, and you produce a different paper using the same method but different data set, yeah, this is fine, you can do it. But when you present the paper, when you write the paper, make sure you don't have the same introduction, the same literature review, the same data method, and then only your data set is different, and then your reading is different, your discussion is different. You must be able to, you know, mix that intro as well. Yeah. Why? Because journals will always look at this 30% rule. Even in thesis, we put all our thesis into Turnitin. There is a program that can actually measure the percentage of what they call similarity. So any thesis that has more than 23% or 24% similarity, our university will ask the candidate to relook at your submission because it doesn't pass the similarity index, the similarity level. So you need to be able to make sure that even though it is your own work, but if you are publishing another article from your work, that 30% rule is very, very important. All right. So these are just some ethical issues. I think I put one more. Yeah. Now this one is, I think, a very sensitive area. I know we have had lots of discussion and debate in university about this. Joint authorship. Now, if there are PhD students here or master students here, you will know what we are talking about. Joint authorship between the student and the lecturer. All right. Now, there are so many different issues on this joint authorship issue. It varies from university to university, from country to country, even from area, from the sciences and the social science. Also, there are varied opinions. All right. My personal view again, and again, I'm not making it a requirement for everybody. You may have your own way of looking at it. Personally, I look at it like this. If I'm a supervisor and I'm supervising a student, it is my duty to supervise him. All right. My contribution to the student is in supervising his thesis. If there is one article that the student wants to put my name and publish, I think it is fine. But if it is more than that, I believe it has to be based on actual contribution. Okay, this is my personal view. If a supervisor says that, oh, because I was the one who got the research grant, it is my data set, or I was the one that managed to get the data set, I gave to my student, and therefore everything that comes out in that thesis, I should also be co-author. Personally, I think it's very difficult for me to accept. Yeah, I once made a joke, you know, with my colleagues. I said, if that is the case, then I should also get PhD as well, right? If I say that this thesis, it is my research grant, it is my data, it is my idea, and the student is just the RA, then why not give me the PhD also? I should be also getting the PhD, right? But no, you are supervisor for your student. So maybe this way, this issue may differ, yeah, from place to place. Is the main author the student or the supervisor? On first glance, it may not be very difficult. You will say student. But I do know when it comes to publication level, sometimes in order for journal to publish the article, the student may say, or even the supervisor may say, put my name first. You will have a better chance of getting the article published. Personally, to me, if it is a student's thesis, it should be the student who should have the main authorship. Okay? So these are just some ethical issues. I think I want to stop at this point. Maybe a last issue about industry research. I mean, I'm not the best person to talk about industry research, but in the little experience that I have, I do know that there is actually quite a lot of difference between the way you will write research report for industry research compared to academic research. One of the main things that I have learned from industry research is that they want it to be precise and concise. If you can put everything into a poster and you can do that poster very well, this would be sufficient for an industry report. Okay? But if you need to write a report, then the report shouldn't be 80,000 words or even 60,000 words. You're going to be talking about a very specific area. They will want to have a very concise report. And that is why sometimes even the report that you give in industry, they don't read the shorter report. You have to create an executive summary, right? So executive summary is meant to capture the entire research in maybe 1 page or 2 page or 3 page, 4 page at the most, depends on the research, but it is an executive summary. If you read many of the reports that come out by different agencies, they will always have an executive summary. Yeah. So industry research will always focus on this requirement for concise and precise reports, whether it is the shorter version or the longer version. I think I will stop at this point. I welcome some comments, and please, Dato Jamil and Haji Shaaya, you are really welcome to give your comments as well. I stop here and look forward to some comments and questions. Wallahu alam. Assalamu alaikum.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you very much, Professor Aslam. I think we have about 15 more minutes to finish, and then let us given the chance to the participant who want to ask directly, and some are in the chat. Haji Shaaya will read some of the questions in the chat. No? Can I welcome 1 or 2 questions first? Please raise your hand, Brother Sharan will unmute.
I think we can take the one from the chat box, or I can read it for you.
Okay, Brother Sharan can read. You can select some important questions and read it.
We take one from Brother Nasir Danzaria. My first degree is on Bachelor of Education Islamic Studies, and later specialized on curriculum and instruction. My problem is when I am conducting research in a space where the whole method differs from education. Normally in education, this format is different from the Islamic studies. My question is how do we reconcile between Islamic studies format and that thing?
I don't know whether I'm the best person. I think maybe this is, maybe Haji Shaaya can answer. But just as my own, point, you just have to be able to work with your supervisor and figure out what is the best way to write the thesis. In economics, we also sometimes have a standard way that expected, but many of my students, my thesis format is very, very different. Sometimes there is no chapter specific for literature review. The literature review comes out in different chapters because I'm talking about a different area. Yeah. So and now we are talking about 3 essays rather than one thesis. So my view would be you just have to be able to discuss with your supervisor what is comfortable for you. At the same time, you meet the requirement of your new department. Yeah. So this is my view. I don't know, maybe Dato' Jamil or Haji Shaaya may have their own views.
Yes, my experience is that because the issue is a different between faculty. So my experience is that when I put my thesis or PhD thesis, I follow a certain standard, and then there's no proper standard. I put forward 10 chapters. Okay, so I met the other faculty because my topic is Maqasid Sharia, and then the other one is strategic management, and they say that reduce my supervisor said reduce to 8 chapters, so I reduced to 8 chapters. Then again, after presentation, they said reduce to 5 chapters. So there's a complication here, you see, between the two faculty. When it is to reduce from 10 chapters to 8 chapters, it rather is when you finalize it, it's quite difficult. And then after to reduce further 5 chapters, rather more complicated because the chapters interrelated, as what rightly Professor Dr. Aslam has said, that each chapter you must link with the other chapter, because I follow that style. Each chapter, you finish one chapter, you must link with the chapter, next chapter, and so on and so on. But if the whole structure change is different, so the only solution I could see is that you have to see the potential internal examiner. What are the best chapter or the combination with the two? I think they give a good advice. Not the last advice during the presentation. It's better to settle within the beginning. The supervisors sometimes give a different advice. So the best I could say, meet the two faculty and ask the potential examiner, the senior examiner, as senior faculty members. They will give you better advice. That's my own experience.
Yeah. Okay, any other question? Brother Shaaya had that kind of experience because his thesis related to Maqasid Sharia, which the supervisor came from, one from Islamic faculty and strategic management, the other one coming from the business faculty. So they wish they have a different view in expressing in developing their research. So can we have some other question, Sharan?
We have this from Abdullah Ibrahim. What is the theoretical framework in Islamic research, and on what basis that we are going to build from the existing knowledge? I think very broad question. Prof. Aslam want to take on it?
Well, I would have thought this may have been taken up by Haji Shaaya previous lectures from the notes that I saw. But all I can say is, because we are talking about doing research from Islamic perspective, when you want to build from existing knowledge, so if you are talking about existing knowledge that also uses revelation and universe as sources of knowledge, then you are on the same base. But if you are looking at a conventional topic and then you want to develop an Islamic perspective on it, then challenge will be trying to convince your supervisor and the examiners that your Islamic base of knowledge is scientific. Yeah, because if you are in a university or in an environment in which there is no acknowledgement of the revelation as a source of knowledge, you will face a problem. So I'm assuming that this question is referring to an Islamic perspective where you need to be able to make sure that the framework of Islamic research, which is based both on revelation and universe and on observation, are acceptable, right? Certainly if you do a thesis in the West and you are having supervisors that don't agree with you with regards to revelation being a source of knowledge, you will face a major problem. So certainly I think this is referring to Islamic perspective in maybe Muslim countries or in an Islamic university or something like that.
In the next one for Prof. Shaaya, writing as a whole is something that individual may develop as a skill. How can someone develop such a skill? Oh, Prof. Aslam, or Dato. It's a passion.
Sorry.
There's no shortcut to developing writing skill. I mean, really, I tell students, if they come into IIUM with very good English, this is their advantage, definitely. But if a student is not having good command of the language and is not able to present this, there is no other work. You have to just work at it and improve. And believe me, if you think that it is not possible, it is not true. I know of students who came, and Dato Jamil will know because he was the dean of admissions and he later on the deputy rector. Students coming from certain countries in former Soviet Union, zero knowledge of English when they came in. They couldn't speak English at all. They couldn't speak Arabic at all. And now we have him as our lecturer in economics department, teaching fiqh and usul fiqh in English. And he speaks excellent Arabic, excellent English, right? So anything is possible, but there is no shortcut. You will have to put in the work to develop that.
Dato aja saya, one respond.
Just experience. When I did my master's in UK, I got distinction in the research. In the research proposal. The research. But when I sit down again, I found that there are a lot of grammatical mistakes. I was wondering why this professor gave me a distinction. So I asked the professor, why you give me a distinction? A lot of grammatical mistake in it. And then what he says that your substance is more important than those technical errors, he said. Also, that is maybe different than Professor Dr. Aslam mentioned. But I think that is in UK. But in Malaysia, my own experience, they are more concerned, I think. I may be wrong. They may concerned about the technical aspect of it. Normal grammatical mistake, not a simple mistake. Suppose that he goes as, you don't have as, and then you don't have capital letters, just one or two or three, not many. That is very concerned to them. If it is a common mistake, lot of grammatical mistake, that I could share the view of Dr. Aslam. But I see that they're very, very small matters. We found that only 4 mistakes in the whole thesis. That is very concerned of them. I don't know, Dr. Aslam. What do you think?
I agree. If it's a few, it's okay. I'm talking about every 2-3 lines, you have a mistake.
Yes, that's okay. But sometimes they see that they say that you have made all this mistake, grammatical mistake, so we scan the whole thing. When they scan the whole thing, it's just a 2 or 3 or 4 mistake. They should just say you have little mistake, please make correction. They don't simply do the rejection or something like that. Yeah, I may agree with Dr. Aslam that if you keep on repeating the same mistake, there's so many things. Really crazy. The student, Dr. Aslam, I agree with that.
Okay. Yeah. Any more questions?
There's one big one from Brother Nuruddin as usual. Prof, in methodology, we are familiar with literature review to find academic gaps. If it is related to the knowledge Islamization project developed by Faruqi, then this review literature can be entry point to state that there are problems in existing studies. It is based on a reductive paradigm, which causes problems in drawing conclusions. Starting from this gap, we can then propose different mechanisms. It's another proposal. Prof. Aslam, you get it, question?
Did you get the question?
I think it is referring to the earlier question, right? In other words, if you are using Islamization of knowledge framework, and you are looking at problems in, let's say, a conventional area, then how are you going to talk about a gap? Because they may not see it as a gap. If this is what I understand, yeah. So I go back to my initial answer that if you are working or you are doing your research in an institution, or you have a supervisor that is not sharing your same knowledge framework, you will have a problem. So it's very important for you to be able to make sure that you choose your research project, or if you're doing a PhD, you don't conflict with your supervisor. I mean, there is no reason why you should be conflicting with your supervisor. If you go to a university where the supervisor is known to be very, very anti-IOK, and you choose to be there, then you have to write something which is not going to be in IOK framework. I mean,
right.
It's quite straightforward. But if you are in generally, if you are in there are many universities in Muslim countries which may not be exposed to the Islamization of knowledge to present your ideas. It's a matter of convincing your supervisor that this is a valid intellectual agenda, and that is why the gap, is there. I think it's also how you present this. Yeah, but if you are in a hostile environment, then you shouldn't be there in the first place. Or even if you want to be there, then don't do a topic on Islamization of knowledge. It will be very difficult.
Thank you, Professor Aslam. I think we have the last 5 minutes. I would like to give one face-to-face questions. We have Brother Nasir Tanzaria. He's raising his hand. Brother Sharan, could please unmute him?
I didn't see him. Nasir.
He's raising the Nasir.
Oh, ask more. Okay, Brother Nasir, we want to ask one more.
Thank you for all this presentation, sir.
Yeah, go ahead.
Really presentation. What I'm trying to ask, sir, is that is it permissible, is it allowed to conduct a research without specifying the population that somebody wants to conduct the research on, and also without specifying the sample out of that population? This is my question, sir. Thank you, sir.
We're coming back to the to the research. Now we are on the report writing, Brother Nasir.
Yes,
It's
sir.
okay.
Okay, if you otherwise, Brother Shaaya would like to respond to that.
This is a very, very complicated question. In terms of industry, they will ask also the population. But it depends on the situation, whether you don't have the framework, in the sense that if you look at sampling design, we need a scientific and non-scientific. Remember that?
Yeah.
The probability sampling and non-probability sampling. In the industry, for example, they want to do some business research. They're based on quota sampling. The quota sampling without any sampling frame, without any population. They just make a quota. 5 people you meet at this category, 10 people you meet this category. You just walk on the street and get these people. So there's no population. That is in the industry. It works well, okay. But I don't know in the what do you call it, other research, for example, when it's scientifically regarding scientific research, for example, in COVID analysis. You have to take various stages. For example, first stage of scientific sampling. You must have the population of the study, case study observation, from the changes of the mutation and from the sample taken. And then the last sample you have to take is the whole population. It doesn't mean the whole population. A certain cluster of population. For example, a group of people different culture, different sex, different category, and so on. So they make an analysis of everything. They have some population framework to study with after they do the testing. But in the thesis, for example, they always refer to the case study, isn't it? When we did was a case study on this perception of professional managers versus Islamic scholars. The perception regarding maqasid based on content analysis, the qualitative method. We discussed earlier the content analysis. We just take a few samples of the book written or the journal written by these two groups, and then make a certain analysis based on content analysis. We just to see the pattern of understanding with this group. For this, they don't need a total population. We just is a case study that will lead us for further research. Perhaps that is my view. But Dr. Aslam could add even if it is right.
Maybe Dato, I don't think I can comment on this. Maybe Dato may want to talk about whether you need to inform population and so on.
I think that's what I told you. I think Brother Shaaya has already answered to that. No problem. So I think we are coming to the end of our session. As I told you, report writing is the final part of our research methodology class online, and we would like to thank Prof. Aslam for giving our last lecture on the report writing, and also would like to express our appreciation to Haji Shaaya for his involvement in these online classes and sharing the slide to all the participants. Also to all the participants who have been consistently attending this program from lecture 1 to lecture 8. In fact, we would like to give you more, but I think we have to stop from here for a while until we get further clearance from the management whether we can proceed to research methodology class 2, for example. We can go into more advanced one. So with that, again, thank you, Brother Shahran, and Ustaz Aslam, Haji Shaaya, and everybody. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum. Very much. Thank you.